Let us imagine that in a single moment, sound disappears from the world. Not that it simply becomes quiet, not that background noise fades away, but that sound as a physical phenomenon ceases to exist. Vibrations in air, water, or any other medium are no longer transmitted. The world remains visible, but completely silent. What is sound, really? Sound is motion. When we speak, when a guitar string vibrates, or when thunder rolls, the air begins to oscillate in waves. These waves travel to our ears, and the brain converts them into familiar sensations: voices, music, wind, noise. If those vibrations disappear, the brain simply has nothing to interpret. The ears remain, but the information is gone. The first seconds after sound vanishes, everything would feel unnaturally calm. We would see people's lips moving, objects falling, cars driving, but there would be no sound at all. Even our own voice would be inaudible. A person opens their mouth, and nothing happens. We would not hear our heartbeat or breathing either. The world would remain visually active but acoustically empty. What would happen to nature? Birds would open their beaks, but there would be no song. Lightning would flash across the sky, but no thunder would follow. Waves would crash against the shore, silently. The wind would bend trees, without the rustle of leaves. Many animals rely on sound to navigate and communicate. Bats, for example, determine distance by interpreting reflected sound waves. Without sound, they would lose their ability to see in the dark. Dolphins also depend on acoustic signals underwater. For them, the world would become nearly inaccessible. Human society. The disappearance of sound would mean the end of familiar communication. Phones, sirens, alarms, music, all would become useless. Even if the devices functioned, they transmit information through sound, which would no longer exist. Transportation would become more dangerous. We rely on hearing approaching vehicles or trains. Without that warning, accidents would likely increase. Music, one of humanity's most powerful emotional tools, would vanish instantly. Concerts, singing, films, everything would turn into silent cinema. Physical consequences. If sound disappears entirely as a physical phenomenon, this means particles in a medium no longer transmit vibrations. Sound is a type of mechanical wave. If we assume that only sound vanishes while all other physical processes remain intact, the world would continue to exist, but in a deeply unfamiliar silence. However, if the disappearance of sound meant that matter could no longer vibrate at all, the consequences would be far more serious. Vibrations are fundamental to many processes: engine function, energy transfer, even molecular motion. In that case, the changes would be catastrophic. Psychological effects. The human brain is accustomed to a constant background of sound. Absolute silence can cause anxiety. In specially designed anechoic chambers, people cannot remain for long. They begin to hear internal body sounds and experience disorientation. In a world without sound, humanity would first experience shock. Then we would search for alternative ways to communicate: gestures, light signals, written text. Cities might transform, filled with visual indicators and luminous warnings instead of audible ones. Could we live without sound? In theory, yes. People with hearing impairments demonstrate that a full life is possible without perceiving sound. However, the complete disappearance of sound across the planet would be a global challenge. The world would become slower, more visual, and emotionally different in ways we can barely imagine. Only then might we truly understand that sound is not merely an addition to reality. It is an invisible network connecting us to space, to others, and to ourselves. And perhaps we would finally realize that silence is not simply the absence of noise. It is an entirely different world. What do you think about this? Write your thoughts in the comments.